Double, double, toil and trouble. Some topics discussed may make people uncomfortable. For fair is foul and foul is fair. On this podcast, we will definitely swear. A lot. Now round the cauldron go, trigger warnings listed in the notes below. Thrice and once the hedge pig whined, the cocktails cry, it's time, it's time.
By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. Maiden, mother, crone. Plot twist, we're all the crone. The stories aren't all made up and the points don't matter.
Welcome listeners to The Wyrd Sisters, a podcast about the blurst and bizarre and all the things you are happier not knowing about.
I'm a pair of silk pyjamas soaked in kerosene. Lacey.
I am the filling in the middle of a very weird sandwich. Tay.
And I am the worst thing the coroner has ever seen. Laura.
Ooh, welcome back, Cass.
Happy 2021!
Happy 2021.
I'm really fucking glad that 2020 is over. I know that that's a meme and everyone keeps talking about it, but fuck, I'm so happy it's done.
We did it.
Today is actually a year since my spinal operation. It's my spine anniversary.
Spine anniversary. What could be more fitting for our first return of the year? I don't know what I was going to say there. I trailed off.
How did everybody go for Christmas?
Very spoiled.
Fine. Yeah. Very spoiled. Ate lots of trifle. Ate trifle for the first time.
What?
Yes.
The first
I'd never had trifle before and I ate it and it was lit.
Had you
Trifle
not eaten
is
it
lit.
because it had not been offered to you or because you had no wanted
Or like
to eat it?
vegan-ness times?
No, I just never wanted it.
Why don't you want custard cream and jelly and then like alcohol-soaked cake underneath?
Yeah, right?
Well, now I do because my mum made it with lemon curd and raspberry jelly and it was so lit. It was so good.
Delicious.
Yeah. That was like the height of my Christmas because I work retail and it was just retail back to back. And then it was like trifle, happiness and presents. And then it was like more retail.
Oh, God, I'm so glad I don't work in retail anymore. Honestly, when you get out, we're going to go and get like a really expensive bottle of champagne and just neck it.
Yeah.
And a face tattoo.
And a face
Yeah,
tattoo.
exactly. Do a JD. That's an inside joke that I will briefly explain. JD, who many of you know was my partner, decided to go and get a couple of face tattoos over Christmas.
Not just one.
No, a couple.
A couple.
A couple. And narrowly convinced out of getting another one, so that's good. He has not as many as he wants.
I feel like that's all the space he has left, right?
He's got a big face.
It's got a big face.
He's got a big face. Big head, big face. It's better than having a small face
That's
on a
true.
big head.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That would not be good.
Lots of
That'd be like a
actors have
balloon
those.
with a tiny, tiny face smushed in the middle.
Sure, Laura. Yeah.
Look, I've vividly imagined it as soon as we talked about it. Anyway, how was your Christmas, Lacey?
My Christmas was great. I had lots of food. My nephews were darling. They one just kept bringing me random shit that I didn't need, like a pair of shoes that weren't mine and 3 grapes. It was brilliant.
How old is this person? They're not like 25, are they?
He's one.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, no, the best thing happened was my friend's a nurse and she's like, Lace, I have to tell you this amazing ED story.
Yes.
So she had a patient come in and what happened was, so a young man, him and his missus, of course, decided to smoke some ice and then have sex.
As you do.
And then after sex, she passed out from the drugs or the sex or something like that. Anyway, he was still like frisky. So he decided in his ice mind what the best thing for him to do was to cook up the rest of his ice that they had together with some deep heat muscle rub and then inject it into his balls.
Wait.
Why?
Wait.
No, deep
So
heat.
deep heat, yeah, muscle rub
Into
the balls.
the balls.
Mm-hmm.
Straight in the
Okay, so
balls.
we've gone.
Okay, I have many questions.
Yeah.
So we've gone from ice to Bone Town to I'm going to sleep to all right, I'm going to go and just fucking shoot straight fire into my actual ball sack.
Yeah.
Holy fucking shit.
So he presented to ED with like huge swollen like testicles.
No shit.
Nuki balls.
And they paged urology because like they were worried that the the substance had gone like backed up into his kidneys, that kind of thing. So normally like you paid urology, maybe like 1 or 2 calm down. No, whole department, 17 people came to look at this guy's balls.
I fucking would too. I'd be like, just grab
Texting
people
everybody.
along the way. I'm like, you need to come
Texting
see
everyone I
something.
know.
I need you
Yeah.
to see this. I need someone else to witness what I'm about to witness.
Yeah, so that was my Christmas story that
That's
I wanted to wait.
beautiful.
Yeah.
What an
Yeah.
amazing Christmas miracle.
What happened though?
I don't know.
Oh,
Neither does she, because like they get taken upstairs or whatever, and
Yeah.
whatever. Like whether he like lost his testicles.
they need to have like a Christmas, like a newsletter that goes around for all the staff, for all the weird shit that everyone's seen, and be like, so this guy's fine. Or alternatively, more likely it seems to me, he lost his junk, and thankfully cannot reproduce.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing.
So like,
Yeah.
is the injecting into the ball supposed to make it more potent? Like when like
No, I think he thought like he'd like the nice warm feeling in his balls. Maybe that's like where he was going.
I
don't know if you'll know this,
microwave a
but-
cantaloupe and get it over with.
Like, yeah.
So did he inject ice and DP'd into himself?
Yeah, as like a
Like-
mixture.
That's fucking weird, because I would, if you smoke ice, I don't understand how you could, because ice is a crystal. I don't
Yeah, but he
understand.
like cooked
Don't
it
understand.
into like a liquid form.
Well, I mean, yeah, it turns into a liquid, but like very briefly. I don't know.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't be explaining so much about.
That's so young.
Stop
my
explaining
knowledge.
ice, Laura.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna stop that now.
Mm.
Fuck. Holy shit.
Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome
back.
to the Weird Sisters 2021, where the lesson here is don't inject illicit substances or
Just don't inject
muscle relaxing gel
anything
into your junk.
unless you've been prescribed that by a doctor and told inject this way. Just don't fucking do it. Moment
So,
of silence for
onto
those
our
balls.
onto our regular programming,
Yes, back on
Uh,
schedule.
we have a theme.
as we normally do.
Yeah, well, when haven't we ever? We decided to do hometown murders, because what better way to get back to our roots, return to who we are as people, than to be
Where
like,
it all
so this is
began."
why I am the way I am.
So I start off today.
I'm excited for this.
So although
Me too.
this isn't my hometown is a very, very small, I would say, cluster of houses separated by vast bushland. Wouldn't call it a
I was
town.
going to say, do you even technically get categorized as a town?
No,
when,
we
like,
don't.
they do- Yeah, exactly.
An
Like a hamlet.
area.
Yeah, a neighborhood.
We've only had that one murder, but we're not doing that one today because the people involved in it are still alive and the murder hasn't been solved. So we're just gonna go to the nearest town, the nearest murder, which is Albury Wodonga,
Okay.
which is on the border of New South Wales. All right, ready?
Mhm.
Here
Yes.
we go. Woo! I've just smashed a whole like energy drink. Sorry,
Oh, that's what I need.
She's ready.
I may need to do a break for that.
I'm ready. Okay. The year is 2000. An 8-year-old Lacey is on a school excursion to the museum in Albury to learn about local history. Everyone else had already moved on to the next room, but Lacey was still looking at the same exhibit she had come across at the start of the tour, the death mask of an unknown woman who had been shot, bludgeoned, and set alight. Lacey's mum, who was a parent helper on the excursion, had to forcefully shuffle her weird child back to the group and probably hoped her daughter would forget the death mask with its hollow eyes and bashed-in face. But little Lacey never forgot the pajama girl.
Oh.
Oh,
Mm. On September 1st, 1934, Tom Griffith, a young farmer, was taking his family's new prized bull for a walk. Yep.
I was going to say, is that a thing that people do?
No, they
regularly?
don't. No, we don't normally. No. It must have been a very quiet bull. Anyway.
I mean, I remember as a child when I did live on a farm trying to herd a bull across the road to get
they
it to a
hate
paddock
you.
that was away from the fucking... Yeah, we needed like 18 people to do that.
I hate you. Anyway, this one was chill. when he smelt the distinctive scent of kerosene. He followed the scent until he made a gruesome discovery. The partially burnt corpse of a young woman stuffed into a large pipe running under the road. Now, I went a bit deep on the location because the old-timey newspapers kind of described it as about 4.5 miles from Albury on the Howlong Road, which I found out with my investigative skills is now the Riverina Highway in the Splitters Creek area, which is just past the Albury Private Hospital, for those who want to know.
Ooh.
So it's suburbia now, but back then it was like a paddock, and it was a, unpaved road, but now it's a highway. The Albury medical examiner said the body had been stuffed inside a Hessian grain sack. The head, which poked out of the sack, had a towel wrapped around it.
Mm-hmm.
The x-rays found a bullet lodged in her throat, but the medical examiner concluded that the injuries to the skull, which had been, quote, savagely caved in, unquote, were the actual cause of death.
Oh, fuck.
The woman had been described as between the ages of 20 and 30, slim build, light brown hair that had been dyed peroxide blonde, bluish-grey eyes, manicured nails with red nail polish, and the eyebrows that had been plucked and penciled in, which the medical examiner said gave good insight that this was a very well-groomed lady, probably a socialite. I don't know what he would have thought of my eyebrows at the moment. Probably maid in service, maid. But the one defining lead to her identity was what she was wearing. A pair of white and canary yellow silk pajamas with a large Chinese dragon embroidered on the back. So this is Depression era Australia. Nobody has pajamas like this.
No, fuck no. No one has pajamas. They have
No
the
one
clothes
has-
that are most comfortable.
They wear the Hessian sack that she was lucky to be burnt in. Yeah, that's what they're wearing. So this is where the pajama girl gets her name. So the press loved this sensational story. It was constantly in the papers. But with not much to really go on, and the police clueless to her identity, reporters created their own lore about the beautiful woman struck down in her prime. Some articles talk about her being an innocent victim caught up in the dangerous world of jazz. That's like legit what the article's about. I had a good time. Whereas
Jazz
other
coming for your kids.
coming for your kids. Well, in the 2000s, it was like video games.
Yeah.
Back then, it was jazz.
Yeah, Marilyn Manson.
Yeah. Well, others talked about what a whore she must have been to afford those pajamas.
Oh, God.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was.
I like those pajamas already, just off the description. I kind of really want a pair like that. So.
Yeah. So after her autopsy, the pajama girl was kept on ice at the Albury morgue for the public to come and identify her. The newspapers were given a composite sketch to circulate, and blown-up pictures of her were put on display at the Albury show. The body was seen by hundreds of people and nobody recognised her.
Oh, shit.
The police followed all sorts of leads, even, I think this is brilliant, tracking down every woman under 40 who hadn't voted in the federal election the weekend after the body was found.
Holy fuck.
Oh.
Man, Australia must get real bored because there's something like that happens in my story as well this week. And it's just like, holy fucking shit, you guys threw a lot of money at this. So obviously nothing had ever happened.
Yeah. A witness did come forward saying that he had spotted a fire in that area in the early hours of August 29, but didn't do anything as he thought it was like a spot fire and there was heavy rain, so it wasn't going to do any damage. He thought it was a bushfire kind of thing. So the police concluded from that witness statement that the woman had been killed elsewhere, most likely on August 28th, her body dumped and burnt at the site. The reason why she wasn't burnt completely was because of that heavy rain that night. Whoever dumped the body must have known the area, not really known the area well, as the culvert was obvious, but it was also like, although it couldn't be seen from a passing car, it was under a main road.
Okay.
And if somebody from the area probably would have put it elsewhere, like, it was a very, very busy road.
Right. Okay. So yeah, if you're from that area, you're like, people are by here all the time, I'll put it somewhere where I know they won't be.
Yeah, whereas somebody must have just come along and been like, oh, look at this desolate place.
Perfect.
Nobody lives here. In 1935, a year later, a man came forward to suggest that the dead woman might be his friend Linda Agostini. Linda had disappeared in Melbourne, August 1934, and he thought it might be her. Her friends who viewed the body said it wasn't her, and Linda's husband, Antonio, also viewed the body, said it wasn't her. But he voluntarily gave the police the name of her dentist, and the dental records ruled out the possibility.
Okay.
So I've had a look extensively at these crime scene photos and what Linda Agostini looked like. It's not her. It's
Someone
not
just
her.
wanted to feel important.
Yeah. Well, but she was missing, this woman.
I do want to see those photos.
Yeah.
Look, are they Instagram safe?
They are absolutely not Instagram safe.
Okay.
Put them in the Discord.
No.
No, I want to see them.
What, now?
Yes. No, send them to me afterward.
Okay. I was like, you're going to have to edit out a lot of dead air. Another identity put forward was a woman named Anna Philomena Morgan. Morgan's mother was convinced it was her, as well as like a forensic doctor called Dr. Thomas Benbow. The police didn't agree, as they believed they had already found Morgan, who had actually been murdered in Queensland in 1932. And she'd changed her name to Jean Morris, and that's why it wasn't sort of found. That's a whole other crazy murder time. That's unrelated. Anyway, she's not much time ago. Moving on. So even after the initial investigation failed to identify her, the police were still determined that somebody must know her, right? So her body was taken to the Sydney University Medical School, where it was preserved in a bath of zinc and formalin, and once again put on public exhibit.
This poor woman.
She stayed there until 1942.
Holy shit.
When her body was transferred to the police headquarters, where it remained until 1944.
God.
Now, why? What happened in 1944 when she was finally buried after all that?
Fuck. Someone finally was like, we should put her to rest.
In 1944, in the March, the New South Wales Police Commissioner, William Mackay, went to his favourite Italian restaurant, where he noticed that his waiter, Antonio Agostini, remember him?
Yes.
From before? Who he had known from before the war, when Agostini was sent to an internment camp. He looked quite unhappy and quite agitated that the commissioner was there. And so the commissioner was like, how about you come back to police headquarters and tell me what's going on? And there, Agostini confessed to killing his wife in Melbourne 10 years earlier.
Oh my God. Which is why he knew it wasn't her.
Antonio had married Linda in Sydney in 1930. But according to Antonio's statement to police, their marriage had become completely miserable, quote, mainly through my wife drinking far too much, unquote. And his wife's, quote, far from ladylike behaviour, unquote.
Okay.
The couple...
That's hot girl shit.
That's hot girl shit. The couple moved to Melbourne as a last-ditch effort to get away from Linda's drinking buddies, but of course her alcoholism continued. Linda also stated that Linda was abusive and had threatened his life several times.
That's not hot girl shit.
No, we don't do that.
We don't do that. One Monday morning, he woke to find her threatening him with a revolver.
Oh.
In the ensuing struggle, the gun had gone off and killed Linda. Quote, the next thing I heard, there was a shot going off. She gave a long gasp and ceased to struggle. Quote, that evening, he put Linda's body in the car, took a spare can of petrol, and just went for the longest drive ever. When he saw the lights of Albury, I'm not sure how much light there would have been in 1934. I don't know. That town must have been so small then. He turned off the road, stuffed Linda's body under a small bridge, doused it in petrol, and set it on fire. So despite the identification of the body being contested by her doctor, her dentist, Linda's friends, at the inquest, expert witnesses were able to convince the coroner that Linda's brown eyes could have turned blue after death.
What?
And that her large breasts could have shrunk after being burnt, even though they could give no examples of either event happening before.
Fire make titties small?
No, they don't. Fire makes titties melty. The coroner concluded that it was indeed the body of Linda Agostini.
Jesus Christ, dude.
Antonio went to court. During the trial, the press went to great lengths. Well, they didn't really have to go to great lengths. Australia is inherently racist. To portray Agostini as fulfilling all of the stereotypes held against Italian immigrants, such as violence, mafia ties. A little like weird factoid, in all of the oldie time papers that I went through, they were like, he's a waiter. That's his occupation. He's a waiter. They wouldn't they wouldn't recognize that he could have done anything else but a menial job. But in fact, he was university educated and spent most of his time in Australia working as a journalist. But the problem was with that journalism thing, he actually wrote for like an out fascist newspaper for the Italian immigrant community, which is how he was landed into an internment camp outside of Orange during the outbreak of the Second World War. Because, of course, like, you know, fascism, he'd be like against the national, you know, anti-Australia kind of shit.
Oh, yeah.
So, look, that's not helpful.
No.
The fascist stuff, not great. Although he did renounce his fascism after, like, Italy really fucking, like, was, like, dominated by everyone else. Of course he did.
You know what? I'm not with them. It's cool.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good now. I'm not fascist anymore. Let me out of the internment camp, please. The all-male jury didn't believe his story that he accidentally killed Linda, but they still acquitted him of murder and found him guilty of manslaughter instead. So this is from the judge, whose name was Justice Lowe, at the sentencing. Quote, "My view of the jury's finding is that they thought you had been for so long sorely tied by your wife's conduct and had been at the time you attacked her provoked to the limits of your endurance." Her fault. Her fault.
Yeah, it's obviously her. She was doing hot girl shit. Like, what else are you meant to do?
Yeah, so Antonio was sentenced to 6 years jail with hard labour and was released after 4 years and deported back to Italy, where he lived out his life in Sardinia, dying in 1969. So case closed?
No, fuck no. What happened?
No.
Who is she?
A 2004 book, The Pajama Girl Mystery, A True Story of Murder, Obsession and Lies by criminologist Dr. Richard Evans, casts a fuckload of doubt on that. And by the way, this is a brilliant book. I read it many years ago. So what does seem clear-cut, kind of, to the average person? It doesn't quite sit right. Agostini's statement was very inconsistent with the evidence given. Number one, he mentioned the bullet wound, but said nothing about the extensive trauma to her skull.
Right on.
Number two, when questioned about her head injuries, he said that he may have accidentally dropped the body down the stairs when moving her, when clearly the pajama girl was beaten like around the head and face, like quite brutally. Fuck. Number three, he referred to the gun as a revolver when it should have been a pistol, something he would have known about with his history of military service, because he did military service in Italy. Number four, he stated that he had turned off the road when he got to Albury, but to get where the body was discovered from Melbourne, he would have had to driven straight through town.
Oh.
He described what's already up to 5?
Yeah.
He described pouring petrol over the body when it was actually kerosene.
It was.
And number 6, he stated the shooting occurred Monday night, which would have been August 27th, and that he dumped the body that night, which means the fire seen by the witness in the early hour of the 29th doesn't make sense.
Been burning for 2 days.
Burning for 2 days. And only partially burnt. Oh,
yeah.
Just no.
Yeah, okay. Look,
Also,
the Australian police, I think, as we will learn over the course of these 3 tales,
Yeah.
are not great at their job.
Yeah. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they are not. So the physical evidence identifying the body was also like, the victim had blue eyes, Linda's were brown. The bust sizes were not matching. Like nothing. There was nothing apart from the fact that they were both female and in the right age range. really like they had nothing in common physically.
Just the eyes
I
get me. That
just-
makes me laugh so
I
hard.
just can't. Did they think they were boiled in the skull or something? I have no idea.
They turn blue. It's like when you get those kids' toys that you submerge in water and they turn a different color. That's what happened.
Oh, that's what eyes do.
Yeah. She got them wet.
So look at this. Agostini was given 6 years, was out in 4. The judge who gave him this sentence had the maximum of 15 years to give at his disposal. That's a lot of leniency for a violent Italian fascist who killed a British woman.
What's up with this judge?
Right? Was it because Linda deserved to be murdered because she was a bad wife and a drunk, as the judge suggested?
A loose woman with large breasts.
Or was it because
Because
by 1944, New South Wales Police Commissioner William McKay was under constant pressure and criticism for his incompetence in being unable to close a long list of unsolved crimes. At the top of this list was the Pajama Girl case that the press would not let go of.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Also, at the top of the alphabetical list of the 125 women who could have been the Pajama Girl was Agostini Linda.
Oh, fuck.
She was the first one.
He just literally was like, this one will do.
yeah.
Did McKay and the New South Wales Police Force use their tried and true case closing method of find your man and then make the evidence stick? Linda's husband was a recently released fascist internee with no friends and family whose wife mysteriously disappeared around the same time.
Perfect.
Perfect.
You couldn't ask for a better criminal.
Perfect. At the trial, Commissioner McKay denied having anything substantial to do with the investigation, despite the case being under his personal supervision since 1938. McKay also testified that he had no knowledge of Agostini except as an employee at Romano's, his favorite Italian restaurant, even though he was the head of the New South Wales Special Branch, which oversaw the internments of the Italians in 1940, Agostini, being a prominent journalist, being one of the first to be arrested.
Fuck. And he would be very grumpy with the media in general, considering they kept going on about the Pajama Girl and making him look bad.
Oh, yeah.
What a great scapegoat. This journalist.
This fucking fascist journalist. Brilliant, brilliant. As for the confession, McKay testified that he'd only been with Agostini for 10 minutes before a typist was brought in to record the statement. Agostini voluntarily confessed to the murder of his wife after being asked why he was so unhappy. They also used the Catholic thing, like he was a Catholic. They need to confess to go to heaven, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yes.
However, at the time records for Agostini's arrival and statement indicate that he had been with McKay for almost an hour before the typist arrived.
That seems dodgy.
Suspicious.
Meanwhile, Agostini and his defense team maintained that McKay had told Agostini that the Pajama Girl had been definitively identified as Linda, and he was about to be arrested and fucking hung up. But if he confessed to killing his wife, he would get off with a lighter sentence.
Fucking hell. Yeah. Sounds like the police.
So, why would you confess to a murder that you didn't commit? Because the chief part of Agostini's original statement was in fact true. He did kill his wife, Linda Agostini. Her body must be lying somewhere in Melbourne still undiscovered, and Commissioner McKay gets to solve the murder of the century and retire in peace.
Fuck. That's brutal.
That's what he had on. That's what he had on him.
I was gonna say, I was wondering whether or not, okay, so if he did kill her, fair enough, and they're just like, so you burned her, right? You burned her here, yeah? Yep, cool, great. We're gonna punch you until you say you did.
Jesus.
But he did everything voluntarily. He did, legit, did everything voluntarily. He didn't have to be coaxed because he knew that he could be hung for the murder of his wife. So the remains of the Pajama Girl are buried under the name Linda Agostini in the Preston General Cemetery. but her pajamas can still be seen at the Sydney Museum of Justice.
Oh shit!
Ooh.
I do actually want to see them. I want to see if they look like what I imagine in my head.
And is her death mask still at the Albury Museum?
One of them is.
Oh.
And all of her clothes, everything, the Hessian sack, has all been preserved and is available for viewing. Yeah. So
Have
I
they
hope
ever done
you.
any like DNA? Well, I guess they wouldn't because the police doesn't want them to. But like DNA
No,
testing
yeah, the police don't think it's worth it.
because they think they've got their man and they know who it is.
Oh no, they're like everybody's dead.
Yeah. Okay.
No, like that's legit what the police stance on this is.
It doesn't
Anyway.
matter. They're all dead.
So I hope you enjoyed my piece, and like little Lacey, I also hope you don't forget the pajama girl.
Oh, what a great sign off. That was very good. Thank
That
you.
poor girl.
That poor fucking girl. And poor Linda. Like, well,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just all bad. It's just all bad.
Mm. But also like 125 missing women.
Yeah. Fucking hell.
And that was just for that period of time.
Fuck.
Yep. It's astounding how many people go missing, like, just daily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
Anyway, my sources.
Source.
Mamma Mia actually had a great article on this, which I was quite surprised. I was like, okay.
They're one of my sources. They
Rock
have
on, guys.
some super dope true crime stuff at the moment.
I like how single mums are getting really, really into like blogging and true crime.
Yeah.
Good for them.
Yep, good for them.
Good for them.
UnsolvedTrueCrime.com, Australian Screen Organisation, has a fantastic newsreel, like old-timey newsreel, about the whole thing. And it's actually like the first like true crime newsreel in Australia, like news sheets.
That's so cool.
They were on the Hessian sack and on the towel, there were some letters. But they were both never found out. They don't know where the Hessian sack came from, and they don't know where the towel came from. Medium.com, Wikipedia, and also Find a Grave. And also I looked up 5 old-timey newspapers. But really the information there is you can get it from Wikipedia, but I just needed to see it for myself.
You did good, dude.
There we go, guys.
So deep, dude.
Well done. That was really good. That was really interesting.
You are welcome.
Who says Australian true crime isn't a fun time?
Well, my story might.
Oh God, Tay.
Oh,
right.
My story might not be so fun. Alrighty, so we're gonna keep the missing person trend going. First things first, though. Some specific content warnings for my segment. It contains assault and rape involving minors. I won't go into explicit details, but please look after yourself. Skip if you need to. I'm not going to bother putting a timestamp because I believe the rest of this episode will involve mentions of rape. So if you want to sign off here, mate, we will not blame you.
But if you decide to go forward, we recommend Beyond Blue, Lifeline, and also possibly the Lord to help you out.
A higher power.
A higher power.
But yeah, please look after yourselves. Those resources are also available on our Instagram and our Facebook page. Now, I know I normally deliver my segments with like an air of jest.
Oh, God.
With the sillies, but I think this week's story calls for like a little bit more of composure from me. Because naturally, these are hometown mysteries and murders. And this story is really fucking scary.
Oh.
It's scary everywhere. But I think when we consume so much true crime, it all becomes a bit watered down. And I grow up in these areas and it makes it really hit close to home. It's really spooky. So yes, I'm just going to start. So we'll begin in the metro Melbourne suburb of Lower Plenty. It's about 16 kilometres outside of the CBD. It's the 22nd of August, 1987, and it is 4 a.m. The bitter chill of winter is beginning to lift, and a family of 4 sleeps soundly. Little do they know that a masked monster has already broken into their home. Armed with both a knife and a gun, because this is pre-Tasmania Port Arthur incident. So the gun laws were not as rigid as they are now.
We got the guns.
We got the guns. he breaks in, masked with a dark green balaclava, and he stalks from room to room. He cuts the phone line before entering the main bedroom to wake up the parents. He brandishes his weapons and forces them both from their bed. The masked man then ties them up by the hands and feet and locks them in their wardrobe. The family's 7-year-old son, terrified in his bed, is pretending to be asleep. The man found his room, ties up the boy before moving on to the 11-year-old daughter's room. He spends 2 hours assaulting her, pausing for breaks and to make himself something to eat in their kitchen before stealing a box of records and a denim jacket and fleeing the scene.
Oh, okay.
The identities of this family have never been disclosed by authorities. So this is the first incident of this happening. And this family have always remained anonymous, which is fair.
Yeah.
A year later, December 1988 in Ringwood, 20 kilometres from Lower Plenty, 10-year-old Sharon Wills was snatched from her bed by a masked man in a balaclava. Her parents were bound, gagged and locked in their wardrobe, and the man told Sharon's parents he was only there for money and to not be heroes. That's a quote.
Oh.
He took $35 from the nightstand and cut the phone lines before making his way to Sharon's room, which she shared with her 3 sisters. The man called Sharon by her name and woke her up roughly before blindfolding her and forcing a gag into her mouth. 15 minutes later, her parents broke free from their restraints and found their daughter missing. Phone's dead, it's chaos. They run next door to call the police. Authorities thought the man may ask for a ransom for Sharon's return since he had asked for and stolen money from the scene. In one newspaper report in The Age, a neighbour was interviewed and stated, "Why would you look for money here? It's not like it's Templestowe." Ringwood back then was, I think, more of a working class suburb. It's a little bit more upper middle class now. It's still a little rough around the edges. It's not great, but it's still a lot nicer than it was back then. 18 hours later, around midnight, Sharon is found at Bayswater High School, about 10-minute drive from her house, wrapped in garbage bags. She was found by a woman who stated that Sharon was surprisingly calm for a 10-year-old girl found it on the street in the middle of the night.
God, when you said she was wrapped in garbage bags, I thought you meant she was a body wrapped in.
Oh no, she's alive.
Thank God.
She's so good. Well, she's alive. The police were baffled at the lack of forensic evidence present on Sharon's person. Sharon had said that during her capture, the man that took her had fed her and shortly before release had bathed her thoroughly, as well as clipping all of her fingernails and flossing her teeth to remove any DNA evidence.
Holy fucking shit.
She was blindfolded the whole time. Sharon's family was so horribly disturbed by all of this that they installed security cameras around their home and would refuse to sleep alone for like months afterwards. All of them slept in the lounge room together.
Oh, God.
Police did regular patrols and surveillance of their home to ensure their safety because they were like, it's fucked. But I think they're still pretty shaken by it to this day. Like I was reading a bunch of articles because Sharon's still alive. She's a grown woman now. And there was a like anniversary of the case and she did an interview with The Age and they were like, yeah, we hope that like shining some light on this like helps other victims and stuff. But it's just like, because it's like, it's the late 80s, early 90s. This didn't happen that long ago.
No, fuck no.
Sharon's father said that he believed the intruder had committed similar crimes before and that he had come to their home prepared, which is really spooky. Police linked Sharon's case and the previous Lower Plenty case instantly, and the search was on for like this masked dude. However, he didn't strike again until 2 years later. It's July 3rd, 1990. 13-year-old Nicola Linus was taken. Her family had immigrated from England. And her parents had chosen the suburb of Canterbury to raise their daughters because it was a safe environment.
Oh, God.
It's a very upscale suburb, a little closer to the city than Ringwood and Lower Plenty, but still very much within that like cluster of like eastern suburbs. They were planning on returning to England only a few days later, and on the night of Nicola's abduction, her parents were attending a going-away party held for them. Nicola and her sister Fiona had stayed home. They were awoken around midnight by an aggressive voice telling them to wake up. The intruder ordered Nicola to grab her school uniform while he tied Fiona to her bed, and he left Fiona bound and demanded a ransom of $25,000 before taking Nicola. 20 minutes later, their parents came home. 36 hours later, her father held a press conference where he begged for Nicola's return. He's like, I'll comply with any ransom. I will do whatever you want. Just bring my daughter home. It took 50 hours for Nicola to be released. He kept her locked up for 50 hours.
That poor kid.
Yes. Yeah. Again, super grim, but yeah, she was found, just left on a random street in Kew, dressed in her school uniform that she had taken with her, but her pajamas were gone, and wrapped in a blanket. She said that he had told her to stay crouched down and prone until he'd driven away, so she wouldn't see him, and then she could take her blindfold off, which she also had on the entire time. Once she was alone, she asked a nearby home if she could use their phone to call her father, who were very glad to have her home. No. During her abduction, Nicola had snuck several glances from under her blindfold and was able to give a rough description of her captor's height. She was kept bound to a bed in a neck brace and, again, blindfolded. She stated that her captor had frequently yelled out to another person in the location, though the conversations were always one-sided. She was thoroughly bathed before her release. So potentially the dude was like trying to insinuate that there was more people to like instill some fear in her, but they all believe that he worked alone.
The bathing disturbs me the most because like really the blindfolding and the fingernail clippings and the flossing, like that's so premeditated. That's like a lot of planning and like just that's fucked up. That just means that like he has not only fantasized about doing this for a very long time, he has fantasized about doing this in a practical way so that he can actually get away with it and keep doing it. It's not a like urge that suddenly struck him and he was like, I can't stop myself anymore. It's like, oh no, I'm going to do this.
Has anyone seen The Fall?
No.
With Lee Pace?
No, that's also really awesome though. That's a really good movie. No, the TV show The Fall, it has Jamie Dornan in it and she played Agent Scully.
Oh,
yes.
Gillian
Anderson.
I love her. She's so attractive.
Yeah. She's the cop and he's the murderer. And he would do that to the bodies after he'd bathe them and cut their fingernails and I think like put like mouthwash in there so that there was no evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was doing that to a dead body.
Because there's also in statements as well that he bathed the girls and himself. Like he was like trying to get rid of literally everything. Also, I think in Nicola's statement and potentially Sharon's as well, they said that he was very gentle, almost caring in the way that he bathed them, which is creepy to a fucking T. But it's like this very strange dynamic because he's very violent, but also apparently quite gentle, and that just makes my skin crawl. It's awful. The man had told Nicola before releasing her, quote, "My freedom is worth more than your life."
That's fucking horrendous.
Yeah. Like the lengths this guy is going to, like, it's insane.
Fucking hell.
He'd also told Nicola that he had seen her walking home from school. It was believed that he had been watching not only Nicola, but Sharon and the first victim as well, weeks before their abductions.
Well, yeah, because he knew their names and things like that.
He knew their names.
And he also knew when to strike.
How many people were in the house,
Yep. He knew when they were leaving. He knew what time people would be home. A profile was created and reported to the public, and the media had dubbed this monster Mr. Cruel.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Cruel's description by police is mid-20s, 170 to 180 centimeters tall, right-handed, thick-wall balaclava. The only image, like, police sketch of Mr. Cruel is really fucking horrible.
I hate the police sketch of Mr. Cruel. I hate
scary.
it.
You can find it on our Instagram and Facebook page at monsterspodcast.com.
Don't put it up. I don't want it on there. I don't want it to taint our lovely feed.
I can put it in a scrollable one.
Good.
But it's literally, it's the most soulless sketch. It's just literally a like humanoid shaped balaclava head
With eyes.
with tiny beady eyes, contrast stitching, and the tiniest little mouth. It is fucking harrowing. The first time I saw it, I felt like my stomach dissolve. I was like, I hate this. I hate what I've seen. It's awful. And it's just, and like people can laugh and be like, oh, it's like whatever. But like it is just this soulless pair of eyes staring back at you and from beneath the mask. It's really scary.
I think the thing that's scary about it as well is just imagining those little girls seeing that.
Yes. And that's all they would have seen before they were blindfolded. It's
Mm-hmm.
awful. So now we've got a name for the monster. And we move on to Carmine. Carmine Chan, a 13-year-old girl from what suburb? Templestowe.
Oh.
Remember back to idiot neighbor busybody. She saw the crimes reported on the news about a girl at her school named Nicola Linus. They went to the same school.
Oh, God.
She told her parents if she were ever taken by the monster known as Mr. Cruel, she would not go willingly, that she would fight back. Unfortunately, Carmine kept her promise. So 3rd of July, 1990, Carmine's family home was broken into by Mr. Cruel. He entered the home by force at 9 p.m., cutting through the fly screen of an open window. So Carmine and her two younger sisters, Carly and Karen, were up late watching a movie while their parents were at work. The family owned a Chinese restaurant in the neighboring suburb of Eltham, which is literally like a stone's throw away from Templestowe. It's right nearby. And her parents frequently spent long shifts managing their business. This meant the girls were more often home alone than not. A detail that Mr. Cruel knew very well because he watches all the families. Fucking terrifying. Mr. Cruel threatened the girls with a large knife and forced Carly and Karen into a cupboard, where he bound their arms and blocked the door with a piece of furniture. After locking her siblings away, he grabbed Carmine and dragged her from the house. She screamed and fought back, but unfortunately that would be the last time she would be heard from alive.
Oh.
Yeah. So fleeing the scene, Mr. Cruel had spray painted the words Asian drug deal, payback, and more to come on a car outside the house. Much like the robberies and the ransom claims, he used misdirection to throw authorities off his trail. Like potentially this could like trying to pin this on like some kind of gang warfare.
Yeah.
There's a really awful recording of Carmine's mother begging for her daughter's return. Like it's really upsetting. It was broadcast on the news, I believe, and it was used in an episode of Case File. Shout out to the OG.
Yeah, I was going to say the reason I know this one after you mentioned his name was Mr. Cruel. I was like, oh, I have heard of this one.
Yeah.
I had to listen again last night as we were going over my notes, and it's just fucking awful to hear. It's just this really heavy, like, it's a mother begging for her kid back. And as someone who's not maternal in the slightest, like I don't normally get very like affected by that. And it really is upsetting to hear. Like it's so visceral. It's really awful. And yeah, a year later, Carmine's remains were found in Landfill, the suburb of Thomastown. It's about 20 minutes northwest of Templestowe.
Oh, fuck.
Cause of death was 3 gunshot wounds to the back of her head, execution style.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So Carmine was Mr. Cruel's first and only confirmed murder victim. Victoria police believe that Carmine was killed because she may have seen Mr. Cruel's face or enough to identify him should she be released. So she went it down with a fight. She would have done something, whether she pulled off the balaclava or was too like stubborn, like whatever happened, like she was not going anywhere. And as we know, Mr. Cruel is meticulous with the cleanup of his victims, with washing, redressing, and release. This fucker didn't want to be caught. He just like, it's fucked up. And he knew how to dispose of like forensic evidence, which led many to believe that he may have been an ex-cop or even an active police officer at the time of the crimes.
Shit.
It's also speculated that he may have been involved in the education sector, as all of the crimes were committed during the school holidays. He knew where all of his victims lived, where they went to school, and their names prior to their abduction, which I think is far more awful than him being an ex-cop or a potential cop, because he spends all of his time
With young
working
girls.
with children,
Yep.
and then he just does shit like this. Like, it's awful. Carmine was the last officially linked case to Mr. Cruel, but it's believed that he had committed around 12 assaults.
Oh shit. Okay.
Like, there's a lot of missing children cases around the same time frame that they were potentially could be linked to him. And it's like, could this potential exposure to Carmine scared him straight, or did it just make him more vigilant? Did he change his patterns? Like, he's still at large and believed to have possibly taped or photographed his victims, so he may also be an active consumer of child pornography.
Oh, great.
Yes, this case shook Australia. Happened a couple of years before I was born, but I feel like it's still, like, you ask around the area.
Oh, yeah. No,
and,
Mr. Cruel is like the boogeyman of Melbourne.
Yes. He was likened to the Yorkshire Ripper, like Peter Sutcliffe and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, people were absolutely terrified. Like, it really did, like, put the fear of God in everyone. Victoria Police formed the Operation Spectrum Task Force, a $4 million effort to capture Mr. Cruel. It was known as one of the largest manhunts in Australian history, but due to a corruption claim in the early 90s, it went bust. Lots of mishandling of evidence in not just this case, but other cases, and a lot of, like, covering shit up.
Covering up their own fuck-ups.
What a fucking surprise. Another instance of the Australian police being fucked.
Yeah. So in 2010, Task Force Apollo was formed to reopen the Cruel case with, like, new technology and all this good stuff. And however, many of the files were missing or damaged, and a crucial piece of evidence, which was a piece of tape used on one of the girls, had gone missing along with, like, other files and stuff. And they just, like, it just fell apart and they couldn't do anything. Mr. Cruel has never officially been identified or caught. At the time of these crimes, he was like 25, and that was like, what, 30 years ago?
Yeah.
So
he's just in his 50s.
Mate, fuck is still out there, probably.
Probably has his own kids.
Oh my God.
Right?
Fucking hell.
On the 25th anniversary of Carmine's disappearance, the reward for information leading to his capture was increased from 100,000 AUD to 1 million AUD.
Holy fuck.
Yeah. There's been a couple of, like, I think there was a episode on, like, a true crime show on Channel 9 that covered it at one point, and, like, it's bits and pieces, but it's still, like, I feel like too raw in some ways to, like, do a big expose on it.
Yeah.
It is very
like,
recent for a lot of people.
Yeah, like that interview I read was when this happened to Sharon, she was 10. Like, that, the interview I read in the newspaper was, like, I think it was in the Age. Like, she's not that much older than us.
No. She'd have her kids.
Yeah.
Which would be worse.
Yeah.
No.
Like, it's very grim. And to just think about the fact that it's in suburbs that I grew up in and frequent and stuff, it's really
fucked up. That was something that I noticed doing this as well, was like, oh, I know that road. Oh, I know that place. Oh, that's around the corner from my friend's house. Or I used to go to the train station there to go to my ex-boyfriend's, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Right. Like, oh yeah, like Bayswater High School, I used to do inter-school sports there. Like, what the fuck?
It's like when you see a movie, and obviously people that live in America probably are more used to this than we are, because, you know, a lot of films take place in America that we consume. But whenever you see a film, you're like, that's Flinders Street Station! I know that place! You get so excited.
Oh, yeah, like...
It's really weird. But yeah.
It's like this little bit of, like, I feel seen. But now it's just like, I want to be seen. I don't want this to be a thing.
Go away.
Yeah.
Don't like it.
Please.
Do not look.
No. Anyway, that is the brief and horrific tale of Mr. Cruel. Still at large. If you're listening, fuck you. Sources, I've got Pedestrian TV, GQ, Good Old Wiki, The Age, The Herald Sun, Unresolved.me, Casefile, SBS, Now Not to Love, Rolling Stone, and Mamma Mia.
Nice.
God damn, that's many sources. You went hard.
Yeah, because there's lots of little bits, but nothing cohesive except Casefile and one other thing I found. So I was like, all right, I have to go to here to do here and cross-reference this. And I felt like Charlie Day with all his strings.
Yeah. Casefile case file go in too. That is a very long. I think it's a 2-part episode or a couple of part episode
Yeah,
that they do.
yeah. They also do a really good one on the Yorkshire Ripper as well.
Yes, they do.
I
They're
highly
in
recommend
general.
Case File.
Like, obviously, it's a very different feel to this podcast, but if you're looking for something quite serious and quite in depth, Case File is the way to go. Great,
And also
actually
Australian.
scary.
yeah, terrifying.
If you don't mind a little bit of ocker timbre in your podcast, a little bit of a little bogan ring to it.
I would assume you do if you listen to us.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you bro.
Oh,
Well, that leaves me.
it does.
But I do want to say, because I have been ripping into them this episode so far, and I'm going to do it some more. Cops are not all bad. I understand that. I'm not saying that if you're a policeman, you're a bad dude or a woman or anything. I have many friends who are cops, and they are great people. But it's the institutions that have allowed them to get this way and cause these problems that need to be dismantled. We cannot have people who fuck up and incarcerate the wrong people or murder people and say that they were correctly justifiably killed, then becoming judges later, because you never change the system with that way. And we know that the system is fucked up and broken. So, saying that, I am the opposite side of our wee little country that we've been talking about. I'm from Perth, which is the second most isolated city in the whole world. Honolulu is the first one, so I decided to.
Really?
Yeah, it really is. I was like, what the fuck?
Honolulu has lots of shit going for it, though.
Yes, it does. Perth does not. It just
No.
has me. It just has me coming.
Yeah, but you're not in Perth, so it has nothing going for it now.
That's true. Sorry, guys. We're in tie with Anchorage, Alaska, as the second most isolated, but we win by like the smallest amount. Our city center is very slightly further away from Adelaide than Anchorage is to Vancouver. So I consider the whole of Perth my hometown because there's nothing fucking there. We're so small. So I had a look because there's quite a lot. Like, I could have picked 16-year-old Stacey Mitchell, which was a 2006 murder that happened a suburb over from where I lived when I was a teenager. She was friends with a lesbian couple who murdered her 3 days after meeting her because they thought she was annoying. So that would have been fun. And that happened while I was living in that suburb. So I was like, that's really fun. But then I was like, I could have done the Claremont serial killings, which were the disappearances and deaths of 3 women in the 90s, which was the state's biggest, longest, and most expensive investigation.
Just been solved.
Yep, 2016, DNA evidence. Woohoo! Or I could have done David and Rosemary Biney, a couple who murdered 4+ women in like a sexual deviance sort of thing where David would do the rapes and Rosemary got really fucking into it.
To make a movie about that?
Yeah.
Ashley Cummings in it?
I have, yeah. And sorry, not Rosemary Briney, Catherine Briney. And she's actually housed at Bandy Up Women's Prison, which is a 14-minute drive from my mum and dad's house. And I stayed with them just this summer, got back about a week ago, and went past it because there's a beautiful winery across the road from that prison where she's currently living.
Australia.
Yay. Put wine and criminals together. Excellent. And then I also thought about the fact that my best friend growing up, her father was murdered in the pine plantation by our house, because where I grew up is very isolated, by a huge plantation, and he was set on fire and found later. So lots of choices because Perth's just fucked.
I'm never going there, by the way.
Best beaches in all of Australia. Fight me on that. Honestly, we have best beaches in the whole world as far as I'm concerned. But I haven't been to all the rest of the world, but I have been to other places in Australia. So, yeah, I'm going to fight everyone on it. But anyway, I decided to go with John Button and the death of his girlfriend, Rosemary Anderson.
Oh.
Have you heard of them, Lacey?
I don't know
all
yet.
Of us, I would assume
Never.
That you might have.
Maybe once you, tell me the method.
Going. All right. Well, we'll talk a little bit about it and see if at any point you're like, oh, I know this. Please tell me because I'm very curious. All right. So, John Button was an 18-year-old Australian man who immigrated from England at the age of 14. When he moved to Australia, he met 17-year-old Rosemary Anderson and immediately fell in love. He was an apprentice bricklayer who lived in the South Perth area. On February 9th, 1963, the day of his birthday, 2 weeks after a curious set of shootings that had taken place in Australia, Perth over Australia Day, John got up and went to spend the day with Rosemary. They played cards, they talked, they had a lovely time, and then they had an argument. Rosemary stormed out of the house and John followed in his car. She refused to stop, would not listen to his apologies, so he parked and smoked a cigarette, angry and trying to give her time to cool off, and then she walked out of view. An hour later, he burst into a doctor's surgery down the road with Rosemary in his arms, covered in blood. He said she'd been hit by a car in the moments he'd allowed her out of his sight. The doctor called an ambulance and the police, and Button was taken into custody. They talked to him about what had happened that day, and he told them about the argument. While they were taking his statement, the police had a vehicle examiner review his car and found that it was conclusive with having struck a large body. The police examiner found blood on the car and damage to the grille. A headlight rim was dented, plus there was a dent on the bonnet, which was broad and shallow, about the size of a human head. Yeah. So over the course of the next few hours, police questioned Button. He maintained that he had not caused her injuries, repeated his story over and over. His excuse for the damage on his car was that he'd run into the back of another vehicle the fortnight before, and police were immediately suspicious. Apparently, Button was a criminal voice around town and had a shocking temper. In the backseat of his car, they discovered stockings and a girdle, so police began to piece together an idea of what might have happened. They believed potentially an argument over whether or not Rosemary would have sex with Button had escalated, and eventually he would not be able to maintain his story. So they pushed and pushed and pushed, and over the course of the night, finally, Button signed a confession that read, Rosemary was walking on the left-hand side of the road. Before I realised what had happened, I had hit her with the left-hand side of the front of my car. I stopped my car and I got out. I saw Rosemary lying on the left-hand side of the road, level with the front door. She had a cut over her right eye and was bleeding. She was unconscious and not moving. Button's story originally, when he first was questioned by police, was that she had walked out of view briefly after the argument over fish and chips. She had refused his apologies and his insistence that he give her a ride home, and she disappeared from his sight around a corner under a railway tunnel. He became nervous that he couldn't see her and decided to follow her up Stubbs Terrace Road. He came across her body sprawled upon the roadside. She was lying in the sand on the shoulder. Initially, he'd thought she'd thrown herself down to cry, because apparently we're dramatic like that, we women. And he got out.
Women be crying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, fuck. I throw myself on my chaise lounge often to weep.
My weeping love.
So he got out and ran over, and she was unconscious with a large gash in her right eye, bleeding profusely. He panicked, picked her up, and ran over to the car, drove her straight to a hospital. When he was, to the doctor, not the hospital, but then called an ambulance. Police asked him repeatedly, why did you do it? Tell us why. Did you just mean to scare her? As the hours dragged on and on, Button asked about Rosemary repeatedly. Finally, hours into their interview, police told him she's dead. She died a couple of hours ago. She died at 2:30 a.m. on the 10th of February 1963, the day after his birthday. Button says that when that happened, he lost all sense of feeling. He also said later that he was punched and beaten until he agreed with the version of the story the police presented him with. He agreed to everything, just said yes, 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 and signed the confession. So we're going to go away from that now. We're going to talk about a woman called Penina Berkman. So she's also seen in a lot of stories called Patricia Vinicio Berkman. She was a 33-year-old part-time model. She was found by her boyfriend, a radio personality called Fotis Huntis, in her home, stabbed through the face and once through the chest with an 8-inch blade. She had managed to crawl to the door, which is where she was found taking her last breaths. She'd fought right till her death. Her 8-year-old son had been sleeping with a family friend nearby, but not in the house. Following the death of his mother, he was put into an orphanage for 4 years. Huntis, the boyfriend, was thought to be the murderer. He was foreign, an easy scapegoat for the crime, and also Penina was not someone that the Western Australian people thought very highly of. The headline of her death read, "Nude divorcee slain in flat."
Oh, fuckers.
Oh, God.
Yup. So people weren't really frightened by this crime. She was a divorcee who'd had sex out of marriage. She was foreign. She was not one of them. She didn't. Things like that didn't happen to them. It didn't happen to them because they were wealthy white people. So there was a very distinct class divide. The western suburbs of Perth are very wealthy, like Claremont, Cottesloe, Nedlands, City Beach, Floreat. Like when you're doing the, I watched a documentary for this, and they're doing constant like drone flyover footage of the houses and suburbs because Perth is very beautiful. But like looking down at the houses, it is very clear that these people have fucking money. They are huge houses.
Tennis court.
Everyone has a tennis court. Everyone has a pool. They're all right by the river. They have huge gardens. Like, just, they're gorgeous, beautiful houses. Everyone's got a huge fucking fence around it. It's a nice suburb. South Perth, by comparison, is fucking not.
Complete trash.
And when Penina died, one of the things that was heard frequently asked was, oh, which side of the river did she live on?
Oh.
Yeah. So no one was very fucking worried about it until 9 months later. Another young woman is murdered in her bed. She is a 22-year-old heiress and socialite, Gillian Brewer. She did live in the western suburbs. She lived in Cottesloe. Now it was one of their own. She was stabbed through the breast with a pair of scissors, bludgeoned with a tomahawk on her head and body, and between her legs.
Oh, shit.
Yep. Her little poodle, Christian Dior, was found carrying beneath her bed.
But the dog was okay?
The dog was okay.
Okay.
Not psychologically, but he was okay.
Yep.
She had been alive for 2 to 3 hours after she'd been attacked. So it had not immediately killed her.
Fuck.
She did die before anyone found her, and the coroner said it was the worst thing he'd ever seen in his entire life.
Oh, God.
Many
There it
officers
is. Fuck.
present. Yep, exactly. That's me. Many officers present at the scene also said the same. They had never seen anything worse. A lot of them threw up. It was not a good thing, especially knowing that she had been alive with these injuries for way longer than you'd want her to be. So both Penina and Gillian had certain things that were very similar. They obviously had slightly different weapons, but both, violently murdered. They both were in ground floor flats. They were both asleep in their bed. The coroner immediately wondered, are they connected? However, police thought they'd already got their man for Penina's murder. They blamed the boyfriend, Huntus, who had left the country. He'd gone back to Israel, I believe it was, and fled the country. So they were just like, we know who it is. He's just not here. So it's solved. We don't have to worry about that anymore. So basically, when it came to Gillian's murder, they needed a suspect. And they found it in Daryl Beamish. He was an outsider, picked for the murder of Gillian because he was supposedly known as a peeping Tom. He was a mute deaf man. And Detective Sergeant Leach, who was an important person in the police at the time, determined Beamish to be the killer after Beamish supposedly confessed to him.
How did he do that?
I'll come back to that. Ooh. So, a couple of weeks later, on Australia Day, 1963, same year, we have a couple making out at night in a car in the western suburbs. They are interrupted. Yep, hot, heavy, good time.
Yep.
They're interrupted when the young woman looks up and spots a man watching them from the trees in the dark. Startled, she shouts, "He's got a gun."
Is this the Zodiac killer?
I know! So the young man races to start the car just as the figure in the shadows fires a rifle at the couple. He narrowly misses the young man's head but catches the young woman, Rowena, who's a bar woman at the Ocean Beach Hotel, in the hand with the bullet.
No!
I know!
Shot in the hand.
Shot in the
There'd be nothing
hand.
left.
Fuck, it would
There'd be nothing left.
Yeah. And apparently he laughs as they race away in the car.
Oh,
It's chilling.
Yeah, fuck. That same night, a surf lifesaver / accountant, Brian Weir, 29, is shot in the head while he sleeps in his own bed. He is still alive when he's discovered by a friend in the early hours of the morning, gurgling. He dies 3 years later of complications from the injury.
3 years later.
Yeah.
3?
He did not recover from it. It eventually took his life.
Oh.
John Stuckey, 19, is a university student. He is also shot in the head that same night. He had flipped a coin with a friend to sleep on the veranda of their boarding house porch. It was a very hot night, and it was way nicer to sleep outside on the porch than inside in the stuffy house. He died. That same evening, retired grocer John Walmsley, 54, answers his doorbell at 4 a.m. and is immediately shot in the head. He dies an hour after arriving at the hospital. So that's 5 people shot in one night. All aside from Rowena, the barmaid in the car, were shot in the forehead precisely with a rifle. There's a complete range of victims. None of them fit any type or known patterns. They're male, female, young, old, rich, poor. But the killer is shown to be methodical, accurate, and intelligent. So now the city's fucking terrified. Like, Perth is freaking out. Nobody talks of anything else. This had been a place where people didn't lock doors. They slept on the grass outside at night when it was hot. Like, nobody locked the car door. Nobody locked the windows. People left cars running, like, while they went into the shop because they were like, no one's going to fucking do shit.
Nice.
There was hardly any people in WA at that time either. There's still hardly any people now when you look at, like, the population density.
Yeah.
It's like the biggest state too, isn't it?
Yeah, it is
Like,
the biggest state. And there's something like 0.3 of a person per square kilometre or something like that.
That's a haunting image.
Yeah, right.
Which third is missing?
I know. Which part of me is there?
Just little chunks.
Yeah, just dice them up. Lovely. So, he's killed 2 immediately. One of them does later die, obviously. Brian Wyrd dies 3 years later, but he's injured 3. And all in one evening on Australia Day. People are freaking out. How could it happen in the western suburbs? Suddenly there's a huge uptake in buying of firearms. People put them under their bed. They lock the windows and doors. They install bars on the windows. Nobody sleeps on their lawn anymore. When it's hot, they just suffer in silence inside. People, like, this is weird, but apparently there was also a huge thing where a lot of people moved their outhouses into the house finally because of this case.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Yeah.
I feel that's really positive move for them.
Yeah.
If I was the murderer, I would be proud
Exactly.
and expect to be thanked.
I did this renovation.
I did this.
People made, like, specific knocks and whistles to recognize each other before they opened the door.
That's so spooky.
Everyone
That's
was
smart,
scared.
though.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Like, all these people were in their beds, they were asleep, like, and all of these cases seemed very clustered together. It happened over the space of about 12 months. So, where no one had really given a shit about Penina, now people were enraged. Why weren't the FBI called in? Why wasn't Scotland Yard called in? But I thought this was fucking hilarious. Very typical Perth humour. Apparently people would knock on, like, each other's door, and when people asked, like, who is it, they would go, it's the Netherlands Monster, because we're trash. So that's what he was dubbed. Excellent. The Netherlands Monster. Then, after the Australia Day shootings, 2 weeks pass, and this is when Rosemary Anderson is run down. Now, I know at the beginning of the story I said that the shootings had already happened. Trying to find an accurate date of exactly when everything went down besides, like, Australia Day and then February 10th, it was really confusing. I don't know if this was, like, another girl was run down 2 weeks after the Australia Day shooting, or if it was Rosemary Anderson, because there weren't names frequently used. A lot of the time in this murder, like, scenario, they're just like, a man was shot here. This happened to a woman. Someone was stabbed in this way. I'm like, but which ones were they? So there's a lot of confusion, but basically the gist of it is there's a lot of fucking victims in this case. So another woman, or Rosemary Anderson, is hit by a car in a very short succession after the Australia Day murders. Then February 15th, 1963, so a couple of weeks after the Australia Day murders, literally like 5 days after Rosemary is supposedly killed, a young boy went to use the outhouse in the back of his garden and exited the house to find a nude girl laying on the grass. She had a whiskey bottle under her arm. She was recognised as Constance Lucy Madrill, one of his neighbours. She had been strangled with a lamp cord, dragged through her house, raped on the back lawn, then raped with the whiskey bottle and placed on the neighbour's lawn. So they did not think that this was connected to the shootings because strangling was not the same MO. Similarly, how they had thought that Penina and... I'm sorry, I've forgotten my first victim's name.
Rosemary.
And Gillian, excuse me,
Okay.
and Rosemary as well were all unconnected because they all had slightly or extremely different MOs to how they were murdered.
Mm.
So, yeah, people upset, but look at the Australia Day murders. Those are the ones that are important. Don't worry about the other ones. That's what the police are telling them. So then nothing happens for 6 months. And then, very suddenly, we have a final murder. Shirley MacLeod is an 18-year-old university student. She is shot in the front room of a Dalkeith home while babysitting for a wealthy family. She was killed immediately. She was shot straight in the forehead. She had left the front door open. So this time, finally, the police found a fingerprint. There had been none at any other murder scenes, which was extremely unusual. They couldn't figure out how this guy had left absolutely no evidence behind. Obviously, DNA was not a thing at the time that they were dealing with, but they just could not find any other kind of evidence. They were looking for fingerprints, and there were just none. So now they had one, and they went literally door to fingerprint every single male over the age of 12 years old.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
12.
Yep.
Rock
Yeah.
on. Yeah,
They were
13-year-old
casting a
murderers.
wide fucking net. So they fingerprinted over 30,000 men, apparently. It collected 8,000 new fingerprints that had been previously unknown to the police because no criminal history. They did not find any match. So there was a breakthrough, eventually, on the opposite side of the river on a street called Rookwood Street in Mount Pleasant, which is south of Perth. Under a Geraldton wax bush, which is one of our very pretty little bushes that we have a lot of around there, a couple who went for a walk to pick wildflowers found a rifle. So basically, police were super excited because they were like, fuck, we know it's a rifle that's been killing these people, and this is in the general area, like the inner sort of city where this has all been happening. So they decided to take another rifle. They kept the one that they'd found and put that away. They took another one and booby-trapped it, pretty much tied it to the bush with some wire.
Love that.
Yeah, good on
Bear
you
Grylls
guys.
style.
Yeah.
And they maintained a vigil over the bush. They just like had a bunch of cops basically hidden everywhere around it, just staring at this fucking rifle.
Is this the Hanna-Barbera cartoon?
Yeah. So they just waited. They just were like, he's got to come back. He has to come back. He did not come back. They waited 2 weeks, and then they went, all right, fuck, this isn't working. So they decided to draw the killer out with a ruse. They leaked evidence to the local newspapers and basically were like, we need you to just make some shit up. And we need him to come back to this bush. So whatever you write, it needs to bring him back to this bush. So the media were willing to work with the police. Basically, what they decided to do was write that they had started to fingerprint in the Mount Pleasant area around where this rifle had been found, under the sort of idea that, oh, fuck, if we're going to, like, the killer would think he would get fingerprinted, they'd find his fingerprints on the rifle that he'd left there, so we needed to go back and get the rifle he'd left there. He basically didn't do shit. They waited 2 weeks. Nothing fucking happened. They were about to give up, and then on September 1st at 1:30 a.m, a car pulls up. A man exits the car opposite the bush and immediately is swarmed by police. The killer is not what they had expected. He is small, nervous, and mumbles. He has a twisted mouth and dark wavy hair. He wears kid gloves, women's gloves, which are later revealed to be the way he has prevented fingerprints from this entire investigation. The man denies everything. He's questioned by the police extensively. He said that he'd seen the rifle when taking a piss in the bush the day before. He decided to go back for it because it would be fun to have a rifle.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. I mean, like, I grab free shit off of people's curbside all the time when it's, the junk collection time of year.
Oh, hard rubbish collection is amazing where I live.
You have fantastic finds. I love that cabinet, the drinks cabinet you have.
Yeah, so good.
Why do people
So
throw
good.
good shit away? Facebook Marketplace, you can make some money.
Laziness.
Truly. I wish I had a car. I would drive around at Hard Rubbish Collection. I would be a hoarder. I would have so much shit in my house.
I got so many Nintendo 64s from the hard rubbish, dude.
What?
So many.
They sell for like $200 on eBay.
Yeah, and I've sold them all.
Ah! I need to become a garbage man. I need to be the hard collection man.
A garbage man.
Anyway. So, no, that's fine. I loved it. That was a good distraction.
But like, if he was taking a piss and he saw the rifle, why wouldn't he just take it?
Yeah, right?
You know?
Like, what a like, I know that he's obviously grasping at straws, but seriously, dude, like, think of something better before you go to get the fucking gun.
Yeah. Mm.
So that all falls apart when they look in the backseat of his trunk and they find a rifle there too. So the man is revealed to be Eric Edgar Cook. He is a truck driver, a family man. He has 7 children and a wife at home.
Oh.
He has a hair lip and a cleft palate, which he'd been bullied for all his life.
Oh, wow.
How did he get a wife?
Well, he had surgery done on both when he was about 3. Unfortunately, it was not very well done, and it did leave him scarred, which he had been mercilessly teased for, because that's what kids fucking do. We're horrible children.
Yes.
He was Australian born. He was born in Victoria Park, which actually is a very small suburb my sister lived in when she first moved out of home. And that was literally like a suburb away from where I was living at the time in Burswood. He'd been born to parents that were in a very violent and unhappy marriage. They'd only married because of his pregnancy. Like, well, not his pregnancy. Them being pregnant with him.
Oh.
Yeah. The father beat him frequently, and his mother often slept at the Como Hotel in order to escape beatings, which was down the road from my job as a hairdresser when I was a kid. Just sprinkling things in, be like, look at all the ties that I have to this, because Perth is tiny. So Cook had a retentive memory, and was impressively dexterous. Due to his family life, though, he was placed in orphanages and foster homes throughout his youth, and he left school very young. He would roam the streets or hide under his house to avoid being beaten by his drunken father. He had many, many head injuries and was suspected of having brain damage as a result of the beatings. He had recurrent headaches and blackouts, and on one occasion was admitted to an asylum. He was highly accident prone, possibly from the brain damage caused by the beatings, and he had many more injuries that he suffered from as a result of it. He was hospitalized for being struck in the nose by a winch, by being... exactly. He'd been a hammer boy in the blacksmith section of the workshop in Midland Junction, and he'd ended up burning his face with steam, suffering second-degree burns. He jarred his right hand and injured his left thumb while working there. So he wasn't doing very well.
It's not a thing. Fuck.
So working wasn't going well for him. So he turned to a life of petty crime as a young age. So he, petty theft, breaking and entering, vandalism, arson. He burned down a church that rejected him for a choir audition.
That's some Joker shit.
Right?
He has all the markings of your average serial killer, though.
Everything. If they said that he wet
head
the bed,
injury,
I'd be like,
arson.
I knew it.
Yeah, we're missing animal torture, though.
Well, he left the puppy dog behind, apparently.
He did, yeah. Maybe because it wasn't full-fledged back then. Yeah.
Kristen Dior. Anyway, enough of Pop Smoke. So he, as a youth, would break into houses to try and impress acquaintances. He was really hungry for friendship, a very lonely person. Which does tie into his extreme association with his family. Apparently, he really, really loved his kids, which is something that the police used against him later. But while he was being caught for breaking and entering into these homes, he had been fingerprinted many times, and that taught him to be careful for future crimes with the gloves. I don't know how the fuck they didn't catch him with his old fingerprints, though.
Maybe jurisdictions not sharing.
Potentially, definitely a thing. But the other thing that I also thought about was the fact that, I, a while ago, watched this show that's Someone Ruins Everything, Adam Ruins Everything, and it has an episode that's based on the criminal justice system. And basically the premise of this show is, he goes through and looks at popular, well-held theories about things and ideas that most people have, and it's basically you're fucking wrong. This is the actual science that shows that you're wrong. And it's really interesting. And the criminal justice one, he talks about how fingerprinting is not an exact science. It's basically just someone holding up a couple of little fingerprints and goes, yeah, they're pretty similar. So that's depressing. Only DNA evidence is really like scientifically sound. Lie detector tests are not. They are totally fucking bogus. And apparently fingerprinting also is. So the fact that they went and spent all this fucking money fingerprinting people, they had the fingerprints already of the person that was committing these crimes and they couldn't match them. I think that sort of ties into it pretty well. So he now knows to be more careful, but he gets caught going back for the rifle. So the police take Cook because they now are like, all right, he is the Australia Day shooter. Let's take him to all of the locations because he refuses to admit that he's had a part in the shootings. So they take him around to all the locations of the shootings and they basically try and probe him into confessing. Instead, he decides to tell them about hundreds upon hundreds of minor crimes that he committed in the areas. He told them about what kind of dogs the families inside the houses had, the whiskey he drank from the decanters in there, where the money he'd stolen had been housed. Everything. Like, he confessed to so many fucking burglaries. It was something like 250 plus burglaries that he confessed to. But he would not confess to the shootings. He just refused. Eventually, they did manage to get him to confess by using his family against him. They basically were like, you're going to be hanged. We have enough on you. We know that we're going to use you as the killer. We're going to hang you. What is your family going to think? Are you going to get dragged to the gallows like a dog, or are you going to go as a man? And he pretty much just confessed, like, straight away. He was like, oh yeah, okay, I did it.
You got me.
Yeah. And he
got me.
confessed so hard. Like, there's a recording, because, again, I will tell you the name of the documentary that I watched. It's a very recent release, and it's really good. There's a really long recording of him talking about why he'd done this, what he'd done, and it's extensive. So, basically, once he confessed, he then started going into, like, I am really glad that you caught me here and now, because had I known that you were getting close to me, there is a rifle in the roof of my house that I was going to use to kill my family and myself. You would not have caught me. And when they checked his house, there was a fucking rifle in the ceiling of the house. He was 100% serious about it.
Go full Ryan Reynolds in Amityville.
Yeah. So he explained how on the morning of the Australia Day shootings, he had spent the day playing with the kids, just helping around the house, doing chores, being a good husband. And what happened then? The detective asked. He said, it was then that this power came over me. It wasn't an impulse. It was stronger than an impulse. It was as though I was God, and it was like a mantle or like a cloud that came over me. I must use that. So his victims were totally chosen at random. He had zero animosity, no dislike for any of them. He didn't know them. They were not people to him. I never thought of Mr. Weir as a person. That was the surf lifesaver he'd shot in his sleep who died after 3 years.
Oh, God.
He described the positions of the sleepers as he shot them. He described how Weir had turned over in his sleep to face him before he shot him in the forehead. He described shooting Mr. Walmsley, the 54-year-old retiree. As the man came through the door towards me, he ceased to be a person. From the first shot of the woman and the man in the car, he'd initially intended only to watch him and enjoy himself. He was a bit of a peeping Tom. And then an urge came over him. An urge. And he shot them. I don't know why the fuck he had a gun with him if he was just for a wander to go and watch some people get frisky, but okay.
I mean, everybody was packing back then, I guess.
True.
I'm so glad that's not a thing anymore.
Fuck. So after the urge left him, he threw the rifle from light pole number 324 with an overarm motion off the Narrows Bridge into the Swan River. The Narrows Bridge is literally like right by the city centre in Perth. It connects South and North Perth together. Police went diving and found the rifle almost exactly where he described it.
Oh, wow.
So there's like no chance that he didn't fucking do this. He is the shooter. He then also confessed to the murders of Penita Berkman and Gillian Brewer, the socialite and the part-time model. But their cases had already been closed. Police had named Huntus, the escaped man, and the deaf-mute man, Daryl Beamish, as responsible for their deaths. So Cook went all the way through to describing having gotten lemonade from Panina's fridge after the murder and sat on the veranda to drink it. He also then confessed to brutally mowing down Rosemary Anderson.
Mm.
So police didn't believe him because they'd already caught the 3 people that had performed those murders. They got confessions for all 3 of them, except for Pooches, excuse me.
Yeah.
So they took Cook to Stubbs Terrace to basically try and do what they had with the Australia Day shootings, to sort of like push him into giving some incorrect information so they could be like, ha, it's not you, fuck off. He did not do that. He showed the detectives where he'd seen her walking along the road, which is exactly as was described and found later after the rundown. He showed where he did a U-turn. He showed how he approached her from behind and then where he struck her. However, he was off by a few meters from where he hit her exactly. And also, he had hit her in a stolen car and then said he drove it to Kings Park, smashed it into a tree, and to try and hide the damage that had been done by the body. They got him to take him to the tree, and unfortunately, he picked out a tree that was 3 off from the tree that had actually been where the Holden had been found.
Well,
So it's obviously not him. He was 3 meters off and 3 trees off. So police were like, nah, it's not him. He's just the Australia Day shooter. The others, those other 3 dudes did it. So Cook's wife, Sally, she maintained that Cook was often out all night. He was often getting arrested. She knew he was a thief and a womanizer, but she didn't believe that he was a murderer. When they brought him to her front door in handcuffs, she said, it's not true. It's a lie. He didn't do this. And the police said, tell her, Cookie. And he said, they don't lie. It's true.
Oh.
Yep. And that's when they found the rifle in the roof. And he said, this is what I would have done to them. I would have shot them all. And one of the officers said, you kill all your little children. He said, I would before I let anyone else do it.
Oh.
This guy's fucking crazy. Like, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
In saying that, though, he tried to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. He claimed that he suffers from schizophrenia. He was dismissed and declared sane by a doctor of the state mental health services, but the court refused independent psychiatric specialists to examine him. The jury took an hour and a half to find him guilty of willful murder. They sentenced him to death by hanging, and he was never tried for any other murders. He was only ever tried for the murder of John Stuckey, the 19-year-old who was asleep on the veranda. So before he died, literally 15 minutes before he was hung in Fremantle Prison, he swore before Almighty God, I did kill Brewer and Anderson on a Bible. So he, in the end, confessed to over 250 burglaries with extremely detailed information and accuracy, 8 murders and 14 attempted murders. He said, I have great respect for the law, although my actions don't show this. No shit. And he was the last person to be hanged in Western Australia. He was buried there in Fremantle Prison, and he was buried above the remains of Martha Rendell, who was a female child killer hanged there in 1909. And I thought it was really cool because I have actually been to Fremantle Prison. I've stayed there overnight. It is a very cool thing to do in Perth. If you ever go, there's not much else to do except to go to the beach, but then you should go to Fremantle Prison.
But the outside of the prison is really beautiful. It's all like sandstone and
it's gorgeous.
Yeah,
it's
really gorgeous.
nice.
All lit up at night. Yeah.
Oh, I love shit like that.
It's really cool. The we stayed in the what is it? The guards cabins.
Tower?
There's like these little no. There's like these little sweet little, I don't even know what they're called. What am I trying to say? It's not
Like
a cabin. Cottage.
Yeah.
That's it. There's these really sweet little cottages all around the outside of the prison, outside the giant fucking fence. And they're gorgeous. You can stay in them. You can stay in the prison, like in the cells, but I would recommend slight more comfort and stay in the cottages. So basically, like, there's a lot more to come here. We're about 2/3 of the way through, but
There's more.
There's more. There's so much more. So Cook's dead, but there's a lot of other interesting shit that I thought was just wild. Like, for example, the night Gillian Brewer, the socialite, was murdered, he went to his wife the next morning with the newspaper and said, look at this. And she went, oh my God, that's fucking awful. Another murder. That's terrible. And he said to her, well, you know my record. The police will pin it on me. So you must tell them that I have been home with you the whole time, feeding the baby if anyone comes to ask. And she did.
Oh,
It sounds terrible. Like, Sally Cook was unfortunately the victim of spousal abuse as well, but she did believe him. She didn't believe that he was a murderer. He'd been a cheat. She'd had women come to her house and ask, are you Eric Cook's sister? And she told them, no, I'm his wife and these are his 7 fucking children.
Oh, God.
And apparently he'd tell women that Sally was his sister and her husband had died and he was responsible for raising her children to try and do the right thing. Like, so many women came to her house to say this. They cried and she had to comfort them and shit.
Oh, God.
so strange.
So after he died, she basically had to raise her 7 kids alone. Her sister was like, you should move states, change your name, we'll stay in touch, we'll help support you. And she was like, fuck no. And she just stayed. She didn't hear from her family again. They wouldn't speak to her after what had happened with her husband. And she died in 2019.
Wow.
Yeah, so she lived a fucking long time. Her son, Tony Cook, became a very successful politician and a social worker that dealt almost exclusively with prisons and unions. He died a year before her in 2018, but he did a lot of good for Western Australia. He had a huge march for the unions to try and bring them in Western Australia, and basically people were like, no one's going to show up, and it was the biggest ever organised in Western Australia.
Nice.
Like, huge march.
Wow.
So all this time, obviously, John Button is still sitting in prison. He heard the news report of the confession and he was on death row. So he's like, all right, I'm going to be released. Obviously, because someone else has said that they did it and gave a confession just like I did, except theirs seems legit. No one ever came to get him out of prison. His parents contacted like the best lawyer they could possibly find, but the signed confession that he'd given the night of her death had damned him. So on trial, Button had denied that police had beaten him into the confession, which he was directed to do by his lawyer. So at the time, obviously, it's a very different state of affairs for the public and the police. Now we look at the police and we're like, dodgy. Back then, the police were literally like the authority of things.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if a lawyer tried to convince a jury that the police had beaten a suspect into confessing, they probably wouldn't believe it. They would probably believe that the police had not done that. So therefore, that made the lawyer and his charge liars. So everything else that they said must be a lie, and they would sentence him to hang. So he denied that he'd been beaten. They asked what has caused the dent in in his bonnet, the shape and size of a human head, and he just said, I wouldn't like to say. So people were like, okay, he's guilty. And the jury returned with a verdict, and they said, not guilty, Your Honour. And then they said, I'm sorry, sir. What I said was wrong there. I need to apologise. He is guilty. We judge him guilty of manslaughter. It's so fucking painful to, like, you can watch his reaction when this is happening and he thinks he's been let off. He's 19 years old. And, you know, he's been waiting for his trial for a while. So John Cook's already been arrested. And so he's like, I'm going to get off. This is great. I'm going to be let off. And then they go, oh, sorry. We fucked that up. Actually, he's guilty. It's so bad. It's just painful. So he served 5 years of the 10 he was sentenced to. And people thought he was guilty the whole time. And he went back home hoping that now he could start his life again. And it just did not go back to how things were. He was absolutely haunted by Rosemary's death. And nobody wanted anything to do with him because they all thought he'd murdered her. So a lot of time passes, years and years. And then in about the early 90s, a journalist called Estelle Blackburn, she picks up the story after meeting Jim Button at a dance. That is John Button's brother. Jim told her that his brother had served time for one of Cook's murders, who by this point was a notorious story. She was intrigued, but didn't think too much of it. She did a little bit of digging, and then she found out that 90% of the confessions that Cook had made to the police had not been made public. There were boxes and boxes of confessions, multiple confessions of hit and runs with other women. So she went and she tracked down these women and asked them about what had happened to them. And these women all said that they were hit deliberately. It was extremely obvious. They ran and he went for them on the side of the road at night, almost identical to what had happened to Rosemary. Many of them required hospitalization, if not all of them. 3 women in one case were walking alongside the roadside. He managed to hit 2 of them, left them in a critical condition. The 3rd ran and he tried to pursue her in the car. But
so scary.
Fuck. Christine shit. But police covered them up. They never said anything about them. They never released that to the public. So Estelle basically was like, fuck this, and just quit her job and began the task of trying to clear Button's name. She found that there were 5 other hit and runs that he confessed to in total, and she confirmed them with her research. And she basically spent 6 years trying to convince, just piling all this evidence that John had not done it, because Cook had done so many more crimes than what the police had said. So John had confessed, which was the thing that was fucking Button over the whole time. Like, the fact that he confessed really put him in the jail more than anything else. And she believed that he confessed under duress. So she interviewed the detective who gained his confession, and he said, "Sometimes you have to convince it out of them with a few rib ticklers. It's better if they confess."
Rib ticklers.
Oh.
They just beat the shit out of this 19-year-old.
It's old-timey fucking Cuphead shit. Like, that's awful.
It's so fucking terrible. It's so sad. So, yeah, they beat the shit out of him. But still, everyone in the western fancy suburbs believed Button had been guilty. And if the western suburbs believed it, they ran the media, everyone else believed it. So it was basically the whole state against a couple of volunteers and 2 lawyers working pro bono. In order to basically have Button completely, have his conviction quashed, they needed 3 judges to determine him not guilty. So Estelle arranged with Rusty Haig, who is an American crash test expert, one of the best in the world, to perform a test with mannequins and multiples of the same type of car that Button had been driving at the time, a Simca. They built a gallows and suspended all these mannequins from them that had a really close composition to the human body with gel and all this crazy shit. And they got multiple different Simcas and ran them at them at different speeds to see what happened with the dummy, what kind of damage was done to the car. And poor John Button's there watching it all happen over and over and over again. He's pretty much seeing Rosemary get hit again and again and again.
That's so fucked up.
They even put a skirt on it. It's really weird.
That's unnecessary, surely.
That's what I thought. They never explained that in anything that I watched or read, but that's what they did. So every single bonnet of the Simcas, the car that Button had been driving at the time, had been completely caved in from the damage. Button's had not been. There was no damage to any of the replica Simca's grille or headlights, only the bonnet in every single instance, no matter what speed it was driving. So then they went and got the same type of car that Cook had been driving that night, the Holden that he had smashed into a tree in Kings Park. So the damage was identical to what had been described by Cook. The landing of the dummy coincided with Rosemary's body. It was thrown up and over the roof of the Holden, just as Cook had claimed, and the damage sustained matched identically the records of the panel beating that had been done in 1963, which had repaired the vehicle driven by Cook. Yeah, and again, that was, John standing there watching this all happen. So not only has he watched the car that he drove back in the day doing what he had been told he'd done all these years, which was hit Rosemary at speed with his car, he then had to watch the actual car hit an actual dummy that was wearing clothes meant to look like Rosemary's at the time.
Trauma!
Yeah! This dude, this poor man. So 2002, so many, many years after the 1963 original crime, A court of criminal appeal determined that there had been a severe miscarriage of justice. Button's name was cleared after 39 years, and the court found that it was extremely likely that Cook had killed Rosemary. Button was innocent. But it didn't end there. So Estelle went, fuck, if Button's innocent, what about Daryl Beamish, the guy who was deaf-mute man who had been apparently signed a written confession by the police all those years ago for the murder of Gillian Brewer, the socialite. So she went and found out what had happened with him. He had served 10 years of his sentence, which was 15 years. He had literally been given a written confession by the police and asked to copy it in his own handwriting. He had told the interpreter at the time that he hadn't killed anyone. She refused to relay it. Detective Leach, the man that we talked about at the very beginning, the important detective in the Australian system, had been promoted many, many times from the capture of Beamish. He had 14 pages of handwritten confession from Cook, which specifically went into the killing of Gillian Brewer, and it was disregarded for Beamish's yes, which basically was signed at the very bottom of the written confession. So it's all fucked. And it's worse because Detective Leach also had another deaf man imprisoned for 2 years for another one of Cook's crimes, assaulting a young woman in bed, which in the scheme of this was just one of his minor crimes. Nobody died, but fucking hell, that's messed up.
A minor crime.
A minor crime.
All of that.
Yeah, so apparently he had a thing where he just found people who were, living with disabilities and was like, you'll do.
No.
That's fucked up.
How can you fucking live with yourself? How can you fucking live with yourself?
Some people have a really perverted idea of what's right and wrong. I mean, yeah, I don't know. But it's like in Western Australia, there's so many of these instances too. I don't know if either of you have heard of the Andrew Mallard case.
What happened?
No, the name isn't familiar.
So
the murder might be there.
Yeah, this was in the 90s. In Western Australia, there was a jeweler, and she had been killed in her store. And basically, Andrew Mallard had been I think he was a drug addict at the time. I'm not sure. He had a problem with addiction, and he was known to the police, and he happened to be in the area. So they picked him up, and then police withheld evidence that would have exonerated him from the very start. And he was finally, exonerated with the Innocence Project, I believe it was, many, many years later. He died last year in Los Angeles in a hit and run, sadly. But he basically lived out almost a decade in prison, I think it was, and the Australian state had to pay a shitload of money to him when they were like, maybe the police fucked this up. So, yeah. Anyway, there were absolute boxes full of confessions from Cook, young women at home alone, but placing the blame on Cook meant that the public might ask a lot of questions about Gillian Brewer's death, which obviously the police have blamed on Beamish, and that would probably come into question about, well, really, should have he gotten any of these promotions if he fingered the wrong man and put him in jail? But Button's successful appeal in the 90s basically opened the way for Beamish, and he was acquitted in 2005. In both cases, the appeal judges found that the murders had probably been committed by Cook, and on the 2nd of June 2011, Beamish was granted $425,000 as a payment by the West Australian government.
Not enough.
No, fuck no, not for 10 years of your life.
No, not enough.
Hideous. So Estelle, obviously this wonderful female journalist, published a book eventually in 1998 called Broken Lives after 6 years working on the stories. Unfortunately, Button has been so psychologically damaged from all of this. He is absolutely haunted by Rosemary's death. His wife, who he met a couple of years after he got out of prison, basically gave this really, just such a pain-filled little, I don't even know what to call it. Basically, she just talked about how Rosemary was just this rift between them, because Rosemary is this perfect girl that is always 17, and Button can't get over the fact that, the love of his life was murdered in the seconds that he looked away, and he should have done something as far as he's concerned. He's tried to commit suicide multiple times. He constantly paces when he's nervous, upset, or stressed, exactly 4 paces, which is the exact size of his death row cell in Fremantle Prison.
Oh, holy shit.
Oh, that's awful.
So terrible.
In a televised interview 6 months after his conviction being quashed, Rosemary Anderson's parents appeared and they refused to embrace the finding. They maintained that Cook did not kill their daughter and that Button was the guilty one.
They're stupid cunts.
I know. Well, yeah. In a conference between Button, Anderson, and Cook's families, like all their families, Estelle Blackburn, and her publisher organized basically like an event to try and change their minds. They went through all the information, the evidence, and by the end of it, Mrs. Anderson still maintained that Button was responsible. It was his role to escort her home that night and bring her home. So it never seems to get much better for them. Finally, there was a meeting with the WA Director of Public Prosecutions to discuss the court's findings, and the Andersons eventually, before their deaths, accepted that Button's innocence was proven, but him and John Button still believe that he is responsible for not having protected her in those few moments when Cook hit her with his car.
Oh no, they can't put that on him.
I know. It's just awful. And this is like 40, 50 years after it happened, and it's just obviously like fucked this guy's life up so hard. He tries to do his best with it. He has dedicated most of his life since to the WA Innocence Project, which helps to exonerate people who've been wrongly convicted. He has a daughter, and she maintains that he is a gentle and sensitive man. He does not have the temper the police tried to say he did when he was arrested. And according to Find a Grave, Rosemary Anderson was buried at Karrakatta, Netherlands City, Western Australia. The police would not comment for any of the sources of the interview that I watched for this. There was a really extensive 4-part documentary that I primarily used as my sources, and they just wouldn't say shit.
Yeah.
But that's the story of John Button and the murder of Rosemary Anderson and the many, many killings performed by Cook.
Holy shit, WA, go off.
Yeah. Jesus.
That's fucking extensive. I had to like color code the story so I knew what the fuck I was talking about at which time.
Fuck me being like Charlie Day with his strings. You were like 100%. It's like the Zodiac Killer. Like,
There was a lot.
Listed at the start. Like, I want more consecutive episodes of this theme.
It's really a good theme. I really love Australian stories. I just feel like we have a lot of interesting stuff that happens here, and we always get sort of like, they don't get covered as much because obviously a lot of American and English ones seem to take the precedence.
Yes.
In this, I don't know, what would you call this interest, this hobby?
That's a true crime interest, surely, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we have a lot of cool shit that happened over here. Like, cool is not a good word. I don't know. I can't talk anymore.
Yeah, cool in the context of the pod.
The pod.
Yeah. For the pod.
Sources. So the documentary I watched, which I do recommend, it's available on Stan. Thank you, Laugh, for giving me your subscription. It is called After the Night. It's like a 4-part series of like 50 minutes long each. Definitely worth watching. And some of it, like, I began watching it and I was like, why the fuck are we watching this old lady talk about this shit? And then all of a sudden there's a moment that the documentary turns and I was like, oh, fuck! It was really good. So please tell me if you watch it and you also have that moment. I also used ABC. I used Wiki, naturally. I used another podcast called Wrongful, which is all about wrongful convictions. They do cover the Andrew Mallard case as well. It's really interesting. The Latch and nowtolove.com.au.
I was on there too.
Were you really? Oh, yeah, you were. That's right.
What a strange name for something that has such horrific articles.
I've never heard of that website before.
No, neither have I.
How interesting. It's obviously something to do with Australian crime. Well, that was my story. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Oh, we're back. Oh, and it feels good. It feels good to dust off the microphone.
Yes.
Actually, a layer of dust on mine, and it was really funny.
I forgot what my fear sweat smells like, and now I have a lot of it. Yay.
I haven't spoken this much in a long time.
No, neither have I.
Well, I'm done with you now. That's all the social I need. Thank you.
We're done. As always, you can find us at wizardspodcast.com, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the socials are on there. As always, as well, mental health resources are on there. If you did make it to the end and you are regretting your decision, numbers for Lifeline, Beyond Blue, and all that good stuff are also available on our Facebook and Instagram pages. Look after yourself.
Yeah.
Like any good S&M relationship, we love aftercare.
We do.
Go
and look
and
at
we love
eye
you.
bleach. Listen to something nice.
Yeah. I love a bit of eye bleach. Delightful.
No doom scrolling.
No more doom scrolling. And everyone else, keep your masks on.
Yes.
Still not out of this yet. We want 2021 to be good, so we must all, again, in turn, be good.
Yeah, get your shit together, Sydney.
Yeah, you gave us so much shit when we
and stop whining about having to wear a mask for like 2 weeks. Just
Wah.
yeah.
I'm bitter about it because I have to wear one at work every day.
Oh yeah, I had to wear one on the plane for the entire plane ride, and my ears were very sore. And I was like, I understand how Tay feels now.
I had to sleep in a mask in hospital.
Oh god, that would be horrible.
It was fine. I was on a lot of drugs. It didn't really bother me.
Oh,
but
okay, well, that's different.
Still.
She's fine then.
I kept forgetting what it was.
Reaching up to your face. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Oh god.
Face hugger.
Yeah.
Ooh.
All right. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.